So very briefly, democracy is a type of government where all citizens are included in political decision-making. So that, as you know, is not the case in every country in the world, unfortunately. So we are fortunate that we live in a democracy where we do have different opportunities to influence political decision-making. And when we're talking about decision-making, it's not some abstract decision that's made, on Parliament Hill where we drive by and it doesn't impact us. As we go through today's workshop, we'll be thinking about the different ways that these decisions will impact on our lives. So we have democratic rights and responsibilities. In Canada, our rights and freedoms are protected by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So it's relatively new in Canada, and it entrenches. So it puts into law all of our collective rights and freedoms in this country. And it's a very valuable document. This document is what people will sometimes challenge decisions that are made or laws that are made, and they will challenge that based on articles in the Charter of Rights and Freedom. This is as Canadian as it gets. When someone is actually asking for a religious freedom, whether it's popular or unpopular, or whether you agree or disagree, it's not the point. The point is we are very fortunate to have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms, so long as you are not harming anyone, so long as you show your face for identification purposes. This charter guarantees that right, and this is not my opinion. This is actually what the Supreme Court of Canada has said in a 2013 ruling where a woman wanted to wear a face covering in a court of law. The Supreme Court of Canada actually did say she has the right to do so and can only be asked to remove it in very specific circumstances. So this is not an abstract document. And of course, the niqab is something that impacts very few people. But this is just an example of there are many other freedoms and rights that have been defended using the Charter that impact us in many other different ways. And many religious communities. So I mentioned the Muslim woman. There are Jewish communities who have gone to the Supreme Court of Canada in order to defend their religious rights, and they have won. There have been Sikh members of the Canadian community, who have gone all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada to fight for their right to wear the kirpan, which is like a small blade that you wear in your pants, and it's a religious symbol. And a young boy wanted to wear it in a school, and he was told he was not allowed. And that case went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, and he was given the right to wear it because it's a religious freedom. So it's important to understand that. Now, it is the right for every Canadian who is 18 and over to vote in an election. And every Canadian can also be a candidate. So everyone has the freedom and the right to vote. And if you want to run as a candidate, and we know there are members of the Canadian Muslim community who are running in different parties across Canada, you have the right. There is nothing to prevent you from doing so. So quickly, a history of voting rights in Canada. So our right to vote was not always a right. So between 1758 to 1866, only rich men could vote in Canada. Between 1867 to 1919, there was a suffrage movement, so the movement of women who wanted to have the right to vote in Canada. And I believe they were granted it in 1919 then, right? So that's when I always thought it was 1921, but 1919. And then between 1920 to 1960, the vote became universal through the Dominion Elections Act. And through 1961 to 1997, it was accessible for all, including Aboriginal communities. Everyone could participate in the democratic. So again, we shouldn't take this for granted. Democracy hasn't been here since time immemorial. This is a process that has taken time. So we actually are kind of lucky that we came on the end where it's a given for us, but it wasn't always so. In the year 2000, they analyzed the different religious communities, and Muslims voted at a lower rate than Christian communities, Jewish communities, Hindu communities, and Sikh communities. Muslims in Canada had the lowest participation rate of any religious community. So again, the question, of course, is why? There's many different reasons that are given. However, our goal now is to really help reverse that trend. Has anyone heard about the political spectrum? Anyone heard of that? Okay. It's a term that is used in the news to describe where parties are in terms of their ideology. So for example, if you hear left wing, you'll notice the NDP is towards the left. You know, they talk about Medicare, higher taxes perhaps to help those less fortunate. You go further and further, it gets a little too extreme into communism, etc. Not to say that the NDP are there, but this is sort of a very loose way of trying to describe on the ideology, where NDP, for example, will be concerned about trying to get rid of too many gaps in society. They don't want to see huge disparity between the rich and poor. They're going to try to take the government and try to say, how can we help our society to be a little bit more equitable, right? So that's sort of, whereas people in the center, like the Democrats and we see the Liberals, they are kind of, you know, it's assumed, and again, these are very loose terms, and it's not always that, but it's just to kind of help you understand what you're hearing in the analysis. Center, they're kind of in the middle. They do want to address social justice issues, but at the same time, they're maybe a little bit more conservative. So the conservatives really talk a lot, and you'll notice this, lower taxes. We want to put more money in your pocket. So it's more about, you know, less government and just let the people be, right? So those are ideologies. I'm not describing the parties per se, but these are some of the ideologies that kind of underpin them. So again, if you're interested in that, you should really read more about it. Okay, so we've talked about what the importance of voting is. I think we're all there. The political parties in Canada. Now, how many people here already know who they are going to vote for? Put up your hand really high. You already know who you're, wow, okay. So it looks like we've got about 50% of decided voters already. Okay, so that's great. I mean, if, you know, you may still, you know, keep an open mind. You may still hear things, because not all of the parties have released what's called a platform. So you may have made that decision based on their ideology that I talked about, based on what you know their principles are, not necessarily the promises. Only the Green Party has released its promises just a few days ago. So the Conservative Party is yet to release a platform, the Liberal Party of Canada with Justin Trudeau, the New Democratic Party of Canada, the Green Party. They each have a unique platform and a specific vision for Canada. Quickly, how to vote. There's all sorts of information on how to vote at Elections Canada. You must make sure, if you've moved since the last election, if your son or daughter or you yourself have just turned 18, you just got to make sure that you're registered to vote. And there's new rules about the kind of ID you have to show. So make sure that when you go to the voting on that day for ballot day, that you know exactly what you need, so that you're not like, oh, you're missing this. You're like, you know what, forget it. I'm not going back home and waiting in line again. So make sure that you have what you need. How many people have heard of Bill C-24? Bill C-24 allows the Canadian government to revoke citizenship of dual citizens if they are charged with certain offenses in another country. What that means is, how many people here are dual citizens? Okay, so you're a dual citizen. Now, how many people are not a dual citizen, but their parents come from another country and they could potentially become a dual citizen? Okay, so all those people that put up their hands, this could apply to you if you are charged with an offense in another country. Now remember, there are some countries where you can get charged with an offense and you really didn't do anything. There are countries, and there are Canadian Muslims right now who are detained in undemocratic countries, and they are unable to get out. They are Canadian, but they're also another citizenship. There's Hussein Shalil. He's a Chinese Canadian. He has been detained in China since 2006 because he's a member of the Uyghur minority community, and the government accuses him of trying to separate or to, agitate. And Amnesty International said it was an unfair trial. These are unfair charges. Okay? Now, under this law, he could even be stripped of his Canadian citizenship simply because he was charged and tried, even though the system is wrong, right? So that's a lot of the concern around this particular bill. There's also a Somali Canadian, Bashir Makhtal, who has been held in Ethiopia since 2006. Okay? The government has promised on both of these cases to do something. Hasn't happened. We know, for example, Egyptian-Canadian, now he's only Canadian, Mohamed Fahmy, who is in Egypt. Under this legislation, he could lose his citizenship, his Canadian citizenship. So this particular bill is also being challenged as unconstitutional because it creates two kinds of citizens. One, you can't touch me, right? I was born here and my parents came from A, B, or C, and I, many centuries ago or decades ago or whatnot, decades ago, Canada's young, and so you can't touch me. If I get charged with something in another country, I'm not worried. I'm Canadian, you can't take it away. And then there's another kind of citizen, like the people that put their hands up, including myself, I'm Egyptian Canadian, who could be stripped of citizenship because of being charged with an offense. So this is being challenged right now. So you see the Conservatives, they're the ones who proposed and passed Bill C-24 based on the threat of quote-unquote jihadi terrorism. And we put the term jihadi terrorism in quotes because our organization has challenged this kind of discourse. This kind of terminology and political rhetoric that sort of puts together, lumps together religious practice. Jihad is a term in Islam, but it's not terrorism. It's not supposed to be. There are terrorists who have taken that term and used it to justify what they say, but it's not right for the government to give them credibility. And even the RCMP and CSIS have told the government, don't use that terminology because it gives the terrorists credibility. So-called ISIS supporters, so-called Islamic State. The language matters. Okay, so the Syrian refugee crisis, who's following that issue, the Syrian refugees? Okay, it's recently, come to the spotlight with the tragedy of Alan Kurdi and his family. May God rest their souls. So that has really come up into the public spotlight. And so here's the plan very briefly. Conservatives have promised to resettle 10,000 Syrian refugees over 4 years. And only 40% would be government-sponsored, which means that 60% of it would have to be sponsored or by private individuals and groups. Okay, so Liberals want to bring 25,000 Syrian refugees as soon as possible. They want to make it easier. The NDP want to bring 10,000 by the end of 2015, and they want them to be all government-sponsored. And these, by the way, these promises that are up here, this is live. We're talking about live issues. So what I say today might change tomorrow because we already have heard the Conservatives, because of the pressure that's been brought to bear, are already talking about changing their position. So these are live issues, and so just you need to pay attention to the changes. Bill C-51 is something that was discussed at the Anti-Terrorism Act 2015. The main problems with it, there's many, and this is not our opinion. This is the opinion of legal experts, 4 former prime ministers, previous attorney generals, people who really understand the laws of Canada. They have said this law is flawed. It's reckless, it's dangerous, it's not going to make us safer, and it should not have been passed. And there's, as I said, a constitutional challenge to it. So there's no oversight over the law, there's no judicial review. Sorry, these are big words for a Friday night, I'm really sorry. It's very broad, and there's many charter rights. So remember those rights like freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of all these different freedoms are challenged and violated from this law. So the Conservatives are the ones who proposed and passed Bill C-51. They claim Bill C-51 is in response to here it comes, the international jihadist movement. Okay, so that's their terms. Now again, we are nonpartisan. We have to raise this though, because the role of our organization, like many other advocacy organizations, Amnesty International, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, many other advocacy, that's part of the democracies. You have these NGOs, non-government organizations that challenge and bring up the problems with legislation and laws, etc., to just bring it out to the public. We are part of that on behalf of all of you. The Liberals voted for Bill C-51. okay? They voted for it, and they said, if we're elected, though, we are going to amend the parts that we feel are problematic. The NDP voted against Bill C-51, and they said that if we are elected, we will completely repeal it. Repeal means just cancel it. Very quickly on law and order. So hate crime against Muslims for 2013, the most recent data that we have, went up by 44%. Okay? And we have to note that hate crime is very much underreported. So that might be showing us like a little tip of the iceberg. Okay? And we know 2014 was worse. We know it was worse because unfortunately the terrible tragic shooting on Parliament Hill, we know that there, after that happened in the name of Islam, terrible crime, completely un-Islamic. After that happened, there was a spike in reports to us about anti-Muslim incidents and hate crimes. So we would imagine that that's going to be reflected in Statistics Canada's next data set. So the Prime Minister Harper stated that mosques are a hotbed for radicalization when announcing Bill C-51, and he identified Islamicism, actually, as the biggest threat to Canadians a few years ago. Okay, so very harmful rhetoric. The NDP leader, Thomas Mulcair, stated that it was irresponsible of the Prime Minister to throw the mosques into his comments. It was a form of Islamophobia, and it was wrong. The Liberal leader, Justin Trudeau, has compared the Conservative government's position on Muslims to anti-Jewish hysteria in the 1930s and 40s. So before the Second World War, there was a lot of anti-Jewish feeling in the West. Very strong, as you know. And even in the issue of the refugees, Jewish refugees wanted to come to Canada, and a government official famously said, when he was asked, how many should we let in to Canada? None is too many. That's what he responded about Jews, right? So Trudeau said, what we're hearing now from this government sounds a little bit like what we were hearing about Jews before. No, look around, there's not many women who wear a niqab, right? As I mentioned, it's her right to do so if she wants to. That became a very big issue. So we get called by the media. Last year, that was when I think probably the #1 issue we were called on, particularly around, I think it was March, around March. It was like almost daily. What do you think of niqab? What do you think of what he said? You remember an MP, Larry Miller, said, these women, they should go back the hell where they came from. And even though studies show that many women will decide to wear niqab after they come to Canada. So that was an issue. Another legislation, and I'll try to wrap up. I know it's Friday night, and thank you for your patience. But the Barbaric Cultural Practices Act. So again, that was an act that was passed by this government to address issues around quote-unquote honor killings and issues that were being, basically violence against women, right? And we know violence against women happens, unfortunately, right across the board in many communities, many diverse backgrounds. It's not an exclusively Muslim problem. It does happen in Muslim communities, and we should be aware of that, and we should condemn it, but it happens right across the board. However, the kind of language that was used in this act, Barbaric Cultural Practices Act, and a lot of emphasis on Muslim cases of honor killings and honor crimes, and even the term honor killing, honor crime has been challenged. So the Canadian Council of Muslim Women, who's got a representative here, Farhat Rahman, they said, we don't call it honor killing. There's nothing honorable about a killing, right? Maybe call it femicide, but it's murder, right? Murder is murder. So again, the kind of language that is chosen, right, to create fear of the other, fear of people you don't understand. So this is something we have to be conscious of, and as an organization that speaks on Canadian Muslims' behalf, we have been very much interested in this. How many people are aware of the new physical and health education curriculum that's been passed here in Ontario? How many people are aware of that? Okay. How many people are angry about that? Okay. Okay. This is a very, very, very controversial issue. It's gotten a lot of people very upset. This curriculum was introduced by the provincial Liberals. Okay. What's happening now, though, is people are kind of mixing up the provincial Liberals with the federal Liberals. And the Conservatives, there's actual Conservative MPs, and this is documented, who are saying, see what the Liberals do? Don't vote for the Liberals. Now, what the Liberal, even if the Conservatives come back to power, they have no authority over education in the elementary and secondary school. They have no authority over it. They can't change it. It's a completely separate responsibility. So it's really important not to allow our emotions to cloud our analysis of the policies that are being presented. Because if someone votes for a party because they think they're going to change something that they have no authority over changing and may actually bring in other policies that may be equally important, you should know that. So it goes back to understanding who's responsible for what. And again, social values are things you might want to pay attention to, but it's important to understand that social values in Canada are very different from some of the cultural beliefs that we have, religious beliefs, and we should understand that, and we should know where things are at and kind of understand the landscape that we live in. And also from a human rights perspective, when you look at things from a human rights perspective, it may give you a different understanding of where Canada has moved towards. How do you get involved? You can volunteer to canvass in your neighborhood. What does that mean? It means go, if you know friends and family or just your neighbors, go knock on their doors and have a chat with them. Encourage them to vote. Encourage them to know about the policies. You can do it on behalf of a political party if there's a party that you believe in and you want to volunteer and you want to help. Or you can just do it just neutrally. Are you going to vote? Hey, I've got a van. Why don't we, on that voting day, let's, at lunchtime, let's meet and let's go together and vote. Encourage people. Eid is coming up. When you get together, remind people at Eid, this is part of our religious duty as well. Just like we go line up for Eid prayers, going and lining up to cast a ballot to say where our money is being spent and how this country is going to run, that's also a religious duty. Perhaps, just as important. Help distribute brochures about elections at Jummah at your local mosque. Volunteer to drive voters on election day and inspire those around you to vote. And very final thoughts. It is important to be part of the political decision making and make an informed decision. And after the elections, it doesn't end, okay? You can still be involved. Even if the MP that's voted in is not the one you voted for, still go and get to know him or her. Go and get to know them. Talk to them about the issues that matter to you. Write to them with any issues that you have. Not just negative, but also positive. Get to know who they are. Volunteer in local initiatives and local councils. So there are parent councils, there's city councils, there's boards of different organizations. Get involved. Find time for that. It's important. Write a letter to the editor. Support NCCM and other public advocacy organizations. That's really important. So please remember to vote on October 19th. And I'll just say thank you very much for all your patience. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook. These are our hashtags for those of you who tweet. Election Energized, Canadian Muslim, election LXN42, and that's pretty much it. And we do have some time to maybe open it up for some questions, and I'll let Hassan lead the questions. So thank you so much.